I wanted to start this morning by telling you a few kind of peculiarities or funny things about Kenya because, as you might imagine, we've been living there 14 years and we've been visiting Kenya for 20 almost, and it has some unique cultural mores. One thing in particular, you mentioned, Bear, that people might be worshiping all over the world, including in Africa right now. Well, it's 7 hours ahead in Kenya as we speak. And so what time would that be? About 5 o'clock, 5 p.m.? And they might very well still be in church because they start church early and it goes all day. Wow. Church is an all-day thing, and it's awesome. But if you're an American and you're like, okay, church starts around 9, 10 o'clock, and then I got to go watch football around 12 or 1. No. If you get invited to church. Second thing is, if you get invited to church in Kenya, you say you visited and they said, come with us this Sunday, and then you're in the vehicle on the way there, they'll say, would you share the message this morning? Yeah. And so you have to have a throwdown sermon ready because they're very gracious about it, but they do expect you to preach. And so you have to be ready for that, and that's kind of humorous. And the third thing that I'll tell you is that if you yawn in Kenya at any time, they don't think you're tired, but they think you're hungry. So if I see any of you yawning this morning, I'm going to assume you didn't eat breakfast, all right? Okay. Well, the title of this message this morning is The Joy of Obeying God's Will in Your Life. And as Bear said, I'm Bob Mendonsa, and this is Julie, my wife. She's going to share a little bit more in a moment. I'd like for her to be able to be heard as well. But I want to define a few things, what obedience is. It's compliance with an order, request, or law, according to the dictionary, or submission to another's authority. And that definition can conjure up the idea of duty in our minds. It's not always a good thing. It's really, if we view God as a good and loving Father, then obeying Him should come not from duty, but from a settled place of trust. That's the best thing. But unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. And if we really think about this kind of obedience that I'm talking about here is not words on a page, do's and don'ts, but this is God's will for your life, His specific call on your life. And that might be temporary for a short period, and it might be a long-term call in your life, like what's happening with us in Kenya. He did this in the Bible over and over again, the Old Testament, the New Testament, and He does it today. Think about Abraham. The Lord said to Abraham in Genesis 12, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. So think about that. That's a pretty huge thing. A very specific and personal thing, yes, but Abraham's obedience to that led him to be the father of many nations and to bless, through that obedience, many people. So then you think of Moses. God called him in Exodus 3 and 4 through a burning bush. He said his actual name, and it made him be in fear. And he could have disobeyed, and at first he was fearful and doubtful. He argued with God, but then he obeyed. And through that, he went to Pharaoh, and he was responsible for taking the people of God out of Egypt. And he was the one that God gave the law to on Mount Sinai. Very personal. And then you think of the New Testament. There are numerous examples of ordinary men and women possessed of the same faith that we have, who were examples of the kind of obedience to the will of God on their lives. For instance, when Jesus called the first disciples, they left fishing boats, nets, tax collectors' booths. They just walked away. Their families. They didn't say goodbye in some cases. They didn't bury the dead. And they found the uncertainty and blessings that came with following Him. He still does this today. I mean, I was talking to Bear, and Bear was telling me his story about going back and forth visiting California Janice's daughter was out there. They'd been making some trips back and forth. He said in 2015 he was driving out there on the highway and God spoke to him about moving there. And it was like a voice almost and an argument. Like, can I do this? You know, it seemed almost crazy. And then he did it. He obeyed. And there was fruit, there was blessing that came from that. And you know that story. I'm sure he's told it to you. As the prophet Samuel said about what God desires of us, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed is better than the fat of rams. I don't know what the fat of rams is exactly, but it must be something amazing. This isn't a fearful sense of duty or a begrudging submission to a list of do's and don'ts on a page that we're talking about this morning. This is the specific voice of God speaking to us, revealing his will to us. This personal plan he has. Sometimes it's something that you know he's already been speaking to you about. Maybe you've heard it and you haven't listened yet. Or maybe you have. And it could be something that's going to come this week or next week. It could be about a small thing or a big thing that may change the direction of your life. But we are yet human, and weaknesses intrude and interfere. So let's talk about that for a bit before we circle back and tell you our own story. What happens? I mean, why are there hindrances to obedience? Well, the first thing is lack of trust or respect. And let's talk about human beings first here, not God. For some here today, discussing the concept of obedience may remind you of those in your past who exercised authority in unhealthy or overbearing ways, or were unfair, maybe even abusive to you. Consequently, hearing the word obedience may trigger a sense of rebellion that rises up in your spirit. That rebellion may occur especially when you're in situations now where you must be under the authority of those who are from certain groups or categories that you perceive you were hurt by or unfairly treated by at some point. Or maybe they betrayed you when you trusted their authority and they disappointed you. For instance, that could be men, it could be women, it could be police officers, bosses, it could be people that are from a certain race. Maybe in your childhood years, you were also taught some unhealthy lessons by adults about who you should respect and obey instructions from and who you should not. I know that this happened in my life. So it's very common to struggle with obeying those put in authority over us, and we can struggle with a lack of trust in the one who is in authority or a lack of respect for certain groups. And that can be tied to things we learned early in life. The second thing is no love relationship with the authority figure, or not a strong bond of love and trust because the person who is asking us to obey doesn't have our best interest at heart. And that can be a hindrance as well. So if we don't trust or respect the one in authority over us due to prior negative outcomes, or the person in authority doesn't have a relationship with us, then that can be a hindrance. And that leads to rebellion. These kind of things, these hindrances lead to rebellion. They can be passive or active. So how do these dynamics affect how we relate with God? For some of us, no matter how hard we try, we transfer our views about those in human authority over us onto the image or expectations of God we have, usually without being conscious. I mean, we do this. Because we're human, we've never truly experienced the divine fully. Our finite minds find it difficult to conceive of this God that's perfect in his plan and his purposes. And as a result, we can't let go of the preconceptions we have of these painful encounters that we've been through with human beings. And we can't accept God at his word and obey this divine plan that he has for us. It gets in the way. So I want to slow down for a minute and ask some questions. How do you see him? Are you able to trust him fully? Is he a good father in your mind to you? It's personal. Has he disappointed you, or have you felt he betrayed your trust at some point? Have you been let down or hurt by God? Do you really believe in the deepest part of your spirit that he loves you and that what he asks you to do is best for you. I mean, I can personally say I've felt at times in my walk that I was deeply disappointed or felt betrayed. One of the prophets shook his fist, I think it was Jeremiah, and said, "You've betrayed me." Yeah. This is okay to wrestle with God. Some of us in this room truly need healing of emotional wounds inflicted in our past, our childhoods, and the grace to get past the pain of being abandoned, abused, or neglected by our fathers, our mothers, spouses. And I just want to slow down for a minute and acknowledge that. I want you to know that you were not to blame, that it wasn't you, and it wasn't God. God did not let you down. Seeing God as a good father, one whose authority can be trusted, and one who is worthy of joyful obedience may seem terribly impossible to some in this room. But God yearns for you to know his unconditional love for you. And for those who struggle with trusting God's love for you, I want to recommend a book that I read that changed my life. Brennan Manning's Abba's Child. Just a fantastic book. Find a copy of it. There's a quote in there that really stuck with me personally. Define yourself radically as one beloved by God. This is the true self. Every other identity is illusion. Do you think of yourself first as a father, a mother, a wife, a husband, an engineer, a doctor, whatever your occupation is, an American, a Texan, whatever it may be? Or do you think of yourself as one beloved by God? Think of how John defined himself, the one who Jesus loved. But regardless of the reasons, there are some hard truths about what God wants from us regarding obedience to his will that we find in his word. In the book of John, Jesus himself said, "You are my friends if you do what I command." If you obey, in other words. It's important to recognize that Christ does not say, "You're my friends if you do what I command," unless you've been hurt or let down by others in the past, have a wrong image of God the Father or me, don't have an easy time believing that I really love you, no matter what a mess you are, etc. He says, "If you do what I command." So he's confident, and biblical and human history and testimonies bear this out, that it is possible to do what he commands in spite of our woundedness, our weak faith, poor self-image, or whatever other rebellious thing that stands in the way of obeying his will. Think of the examples of those very disciples he was just addressing at that time. These were the people that doubted him, rebuked him, argued with each other about who was going to be first in his kingdom, the greatest in his kingdom. And these men ended up dying for their faith, history records, because they did what he commanded. The same men. So where do we go when we struggle with obedience? The Word of God. I would encourage you, there are scriptures that God wants to use. It's alive and active, Scripture is. It's sharper than any double-edged sword. It penetrates even to dividing soul and spirit, joints and marrow. It judges the thoughts and attitudes of the heart. It's like a surgeon's knife. It cuts, it convicts. There are scriptures that God will use to help you in this regard. Paul talked about this fight against attitude and thought rebellion to obeying Christ in warlike language to the Corinthian church. Like it's a war. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. This is a war, people. So if we can reckon with our rebellion and fight it head on, that is half the battle. But there is so much more to gain in the blessings that will follow as we learn more fully what it is to experience God. And that comes when we obey his will for our lives, that specific personal will, no matter the cost, in spite of our fears and doubts. Julie and I feel very fortunate that early in our walk, in this period of time when we were brand new believers. We went through a 12-week study on hearing God's voice and learning to obey Him with a committed group of brothers and sisters. And we're convinced that it set us on a course to understand some incredibly valuable things back then about what is most important in life. And what is most important in life is not material things, career, country, the American dream, comfort, safety, achievements. The greatest, most valuable thing that you can live for is to experience God in your life, to know that He worked through you, He used you, that He showed up and there were those amazing coincidences where God acted and worked, that after a long time of believing that He told you to do something, that He showed up and affirmed it, that there was fruit despite the trials. And we're not alone in this. Think about the biblical stories that I talked to you about earlier. Think of even Esther and the Apostle Paul. Each one, when faced with an incredible calling from God to take risks, face challenges, and go forward in faith, did exactly that. And they helped shape kingdom history in immeasurable ways for the glory of God. God is still doing this. He's doing it throughout His kingdom on this earth, even today. And He wants to do it through your lives. I want to tell you our Naomi's Village story now to help illustrate this point. Okay, I was an orthopedic surgeon in private practice back in 1997. When I finished up, this is a few years later. By that time, we had a young daughter who was, I think in this picture, she's about 4 years old. And Will, making the funny face, was about 3.5. And this is some of our family on Julie's side. And we were living in the suburbs of Dallas. I was very happily employed in this private practice. And we had no designs on changing the direction of our life. We had no interest in going a different direction. We were having fun, going on vacations, living in the suburbs. Our kids were in private school, and then God interrupted and invited me through a friend to go to the Philippines in 2001. I was just barely into my practice, a few years into it, and I met my first overseas patient. And this is a man named Orlan in the Philippines in a small jungle hospital. He had a terribly infected leg, and he needed surgery to save his life. And I was brought by God to this remote place, and I did an operation on him that saved his life. And then this is the Filipino staff that helped me. I did not plan to go there and do any medical, but God brought me to this place. And then over the next few weeks as I was there in the Philippines, a lot of other amazing things happened. I came back home, and then the next year I went to Brazil. I went on a trip on the Amazon River, similar. We ministered in villages, would stay on this riverboat, sleep in hammocks at night, took care of patients, and God used me and stretched me, took me out of my comfort zone. And I kept talking to Julie saying, this is something you have to go and see and experience yourself. You've got to come along on a trip with me. And she just wasn't ready. It wasn't on her radar yet. We had these 2 young kids. She was a suburban house mom and wife, and she was safe, and everything was mapped out and planned, and she didn't feel ready to take a risk yet. And besides that, we were in the shadows of 911 at that point. This was a scary world. My second trip was in 2002. But then God spoke to her very specifically in a church service, like so specifically you couldn't miss it. And then 2 weeks later, what was said to her in that church service was confirmed with a phone call from Kajabi, Kenya, and we were asked to go to this place for a month, a place we'd never heard of, eerily similar to what was said to her in church. And we went, and she obeyed. And this is Kajabi from an aerial view. It overlooks the Great Rift Valley. And there's a mission station there with some hospitals and some houses that you can stay in. And my first patient I took care of there in Kenya, I kid you not, had been bitten on the leg by a hippo. That is a hippo's mouth. Big teeth. You can imagine what it did to his leg. And the whole month was that way. Patient after patient with terrible injuries and big tumors and infections. I was the only orthopedic surgeon there. Julie, meanwhile, and the kids were taking care of ministering at a children's hospital there and doing what they could to help. There were women there with children that were getting surgery, and these were women that were very afraid and had no resources, and so they were just there trying to help in any way they could to minister to their needs and comfort them, pray for them. And our kids, the great part about it was they were not afraid to enter into the suffering of others. You can take your kids on trips. Don't be afraid to do it. And when we were getting close to the end of our 1 month in Kenya, we went on a safari. And as we were leaving that safari, flying out on a bush plane, God spoke to me very specifically, and I wrote it in my journal. He said, "My creation is way more vast and beautiful than you ever imagined. Much of it is suffering greatly, and I care most that you do something about that and you convince other people to do the same." And I wrote that down. It's still there today. And I knew at that point that his creation was way more vast and beautiful than I had ever imagined, because we had just been on safari. And I knew that much of it was suffering greatly, because this was my 3rd mission trip, and I'd been taking care of all these battered human beings with terrible maladies. And I was ready when he said, "I care most that you do something about that." I was participating in that. But the part about convincing other people to do the same, I didn't know what that meant yet. And it's been like our whole life since that time. That's gradually happened. We went back to Texas, got back into our lives. There was tension. I mean, we loved our lives. We weren't looking to move. And then we went back for 2 months the next year. And Julie found this truck stop town. She got over her fears. She got off the mission station and she forayed. She went out into the community and she found all these children. What she found was heartbreaking. Brutal generational poverty. The effects of the AIDS epidemic, ravaging children and families and communities in this truck stop town. Children taking care of babies because parents were dead. And it broke her heart. And like a rudder changes the direction of a ship. I love this quote. That's what happened to Julie. A person who did not want to go on a mission trip started to talk in ways of like, I have to do something. So we were shown a piece of land on that second trip. That's the land that our children's home is on now. And we just went and prayed. You can see how brown and dead it is. And there was a well on it, and a baby had fallen down that well and died the year before, 40 foot deep. And that's the history of the land. And we prayed. Long story short, we went back 2 more times for 2 months each, and the vision continued to grow. God gave Julie the name Naomi's Village from the book of Ruth, and then we moved. God called us to move to Kenya in 2008. We've been living there for 14 years. And we started breaking ground on a children's project called Naomi's Village in 2009. And we opened the home in 2011. And this just briefly shows the construction process. We had never built a building before. We hadn't even built our own house in the States. Kenyans built it. We oversaw it. And it took 14 months. And this is a home built to raise redemptive leaders, servant leaders from among that population of orphan kids that Julie had encountered. This is the first child, Joshua. Joshua came from a really battered background. His father killed his mother, his 7-year-old older brother, and 1-year-old younger brother, and then hung himself one night in a fit of rage, and he was the only survivor. Joshua means the Lord saves. He was our first child. And now Joshua is 14? Yeah, that's him. Yeah. And he, like so many of our other children, are just examples of what God has done. God has done it. Our yes has been a small thing, and it's been what God has done. The home is there, and the programs are there to raise children from systemic corruption and generational poverty to be agents of change in their own nation, raising them for compassionate, courageous leadership. I'm going to let Julie come up and kind of go through some of these programs and tell you about them, because she is equipped and ready to do that now, and I want you to hear from her also. Yes, I will.
I can't see me behind this podium, can you? I'll kind of move it over to the side. In my previous life, I was a math teacher, so I have a problem with things being between me and my students. So I'll move that anyways. But I also have my notes because this is my absolute favorite thing to talk about, and I could keep you here till 5 p.m., honestly, telling you everything and about all the kids that live there. So Bob told you about Joshua, who came in, child number 1. We have 90 children now. We opened in January 2011. We have 90 kids with a capacity for 100, but we're not interested in just speeding through this. We wait. The Lord brings the kids that are supposed to come in. And as he told you, we're raising them to be the leaders, the future courageous and compassionate leaders who can be the agents of necessary change in their country. That means we have to be very intentional about how we raise the kids. The kids that live at the home, they are total orphans. That means they have no mother, no father, no relative that is willing or capable of taking care of them. 90 kids. We have a baby room. It's a beautiful place. The youngest one is actually about 2 months now, and then up to 19, 20, even 20 years old. But some of our kids came to us late, and so they began school late. So they're 20 years old, but still in school. About 15% of our kids are HIV positive, but if you look at this picture of some of the kids, you would never know which ones. That's how good the care is there. The home is built very intentionally with clean and straight lines. It is meant to be a place that fosters leaders. So growing up with dirt floors and pit latrines and 6 people sleeping on one little mattress, that doesn't breed the hope and the ability to believe that you can be the one to bring change to your country. So how we have built the home is very intentional in speaking to the kids their value and their worth as human beings who are created in the image of Christ. This is our dining hall at Naomi's Village. You can see the attributes of God that are around it, so that every day when we go in there, we are surrounded with who God, our Father, is. It also doubles as our church sanctuary on Sundays, and I'm telling you, it is the best place to be, to hear these 90 kids with full voices and full hearts singing, "Good, good Father." And Andrew, you're hired to come out actually too, because they would absolutely have loved worship this morning. We built teenager houses. So one is for the girls, one is for the boys. They helped to design the model of it, so it looks very different than our other buildings, but they love this place. Again, clean lines, structure, order. Even the way it's decorated on the inside is intentional so that the kids can dream and they can learn how to dream big. The teenagers each have their own space. It's upstairs. It's kind of a little bit like a college dormitory, so there's 2 per room, but they have their own space to help them learn more responsibility, right, as they transition on to adulthood. Fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, clean water, all of these are necessary components of raising healthy children. But the most important thing in raising healthy, well-adjusted children, especially those who come from backgrounds of trauma, is fostering healthy attachment. So our caregiving model is set up to do that. We have 2 parents, 2 moms, that have about 4 children, 3 to 4 children per family. So this mother, Mary, those are her boys. She waits for them when they come home in school. They have time to have the heart conversations, and we really have this healthy attachment now. We do things like your family does. We go on on vacation, so we take an annual beach vacation. We celebrate Christmas. One of our traditions is matching pajamas. Just to pause on this slide, those 4 little girls, they all came in as abandoned babies. They had just been thrown away. All that beauty and value and worth and all that they will contribute to the world one day had just been thrown away. We celebrate summertime and weekends, and it's nonstop play and fun around the home, as you can imagine. Bikes, wheelbarrows, everything turns into a toy at Naomi's Village. And we love dogs, especially yellow labs. So this is Hazel here on the left. She's our newest one. And actually, Bob was just showing us all pictures last night of 2 black labs that we might have by the time Bob and I get back to Kenya. So the ministry started with the home, Naomi's Village home, but it didn't take us long to recognize that we needed to spread this out to the community. And it wasn't so much that Bob and I recognized this as the Lord. It was just another step. It was another step that God said that we needed to do, was to start a school. And we needed to take that into the community because the crisis there, the level of poverty is significant. So we have then the home and then these community outreach programs that are somewhat intended to mirror what happens at the home. Leap Preschool is for 3 and 4-year-olds, kids that come from Naomi's Village and from the community. Cornerstone Preparatory Academy is our K through 12 school. I'm going to tell you briefly about each of these. Again, kids from the community and kids from Naomi's Village home that attend that school. Toto, the early childhood program that works with pregnant mothers, and then our Mayan Deleo initiative. Mayan Deleo means development in Swahili, so that's our community development program. Most of our families in the community live on $2.50 or less per day, so they're at the international poverty line or below. So Leap Preschool is a beautiful, dynamic learning environment for 100 3 and 4-year-olds. It's play-based and literacy focused. It's on site at Naomi's Village. The kids are put in ratios, little class groups of ratios of 10 to 1, so that they get the personal attention that they need from their teachers to feel safe and secure. Most of our kids coming from the community live in environments of toxic stress, so they will not be able to learn unless they feel safe and secure, and you can see how connected they are with their teacher there. The playground is unique to have a playground, first of all. In our community, there are no parks. There are no playgrounds. But this playground is a favorite spot for the preschoolers. And here at the playground, they learn team building skills. They develop self-confidence. Their gross motor skills are growing. And it is just a place where they can play free and unencumbered. Our teachers are really wonderful, and they understand the value of getting down on eye level with the children as they help to build their architecture and develop language skills. Lots of different learning environments for our kids. Research shows that kids at this age learn best through their own exploration, through child-directed play. So we have lots of opportunities for self-discovery of new concepts, imaginary play, simple play implements to help develop fine motor skills, to develop their imaginations and creativity. Leap is just a wonderful place. And then at the end of the day, the kids load up on the bus, the ones that live in the community, and they're safely transported home, tired, but full of joy and anticipation that they get to come back tomorrow and do it all again. Cornerstone is our K through 12 school. It's a world-class facility. This is designed to give the kids a transformational education and really to educate them on par with your children here. We have 326 students. Again, the majority of those come from the community. The others are the ones who are school age from Naomi's Village home. We run 6 buses per day to bring them to school so they can get there safely, and then also to take them home. Our classrooms are big, bright, colorful, safe learning spaces. Our student-teacher ratio is no more than 25 to 1. In our area, in our community, other schools, the average student-teacher ratio is 86 to 1. So this is unique. Again, we want to offer the things that your kids receive. So we have a library full of books. There are no libraries in our community. A library full of books, a computer lab that functions daily so the kids are not just introduced to technology, but they're immersed in it. They learn it. They learn how to use it. A science lab where the kids are engaged in hands-on learning activities. Those are just some of the unique facilities that we offer at Cornerstone. We, of course, have a dining hall because nutrition is a critical component of raising healthy kids. And for our community kids, we know that if they're not eating at school, they're probably not eating, and they're not eating a nutritious diet for sure. So we provide 12 meals per week. We go to school Monday through Saturday. They come for breakfast, have lunch, and then there are 2 snacks that they get each day as well, morning and afternoon, so that they go home with full tummies in case they're not eating again until breakfast. Of course, sports are a vital part of any school. Kids learn to develop executive function skills. They establish healthy exercise practices, learn to work in teams. So we have a gymnasium at Cornerstone. And our kids have learned to play basketball. Otherwise, they would not know how to play basketball. We have girls teams, boys teams, and right before we came to the U.S., one of our boys teams won a tournament in the capital city of Nairobi, which was, yes, a huge accomplishment. Proud mom moment there. We have a regulation-sized soccer pitch and track and field. You can see a volleyball net there. The kids love to play volleyball. We were talking about this last night. Maybe, just maybe, one of Kenya's long-distance, world-class, Olympic runners will come out of Cornerstone. It's beautiful to get out there and walk that field every day. So Toto, I want to tell you briefly about the Toto program, which is our program designed to work with pregnant mothers in our community. Toto means baby in Swahili. For us, it stands for mother, toddler, 1-to-1. So in this program, we have an RN, a registered Kenyan RN, who makes regularly scheduled home visits to our pregnant mothers, where she has targeted objectives that she covers with them based on the gestational age of their baby. We are really trying to help the mothers understand their importance in the life of their child, that an attentive, attached mother makes all the difference. So that's Gaudentia on the right. So she meets with, goes through trainings and educations to help the mothers as they're preparing for the delivery of their baby. Then once the baby is born, Gaudentia, our nurse, continues with these regularly scheduled visits once every 2 weeks so that she can check in on the mother and the baby, doing well checks, helping to foster healthy attachment, helping with healthy parenting principles to teach those, providing nutritional supplements, and then helping the mother understand the value of early literacy, reading, singing, and playing with your baby at a young age. Our Mayan Deleo initiative is our community development program that is primarily designed to focus on our community families. As I said, they live at the poverty line or below, so there's a lot of toxic stress that comes from living in such levels of poverty. So our Mayan Deleo initiative is primarily focused on helping to alleviate that stress in the home. We do this by providing water storage tanks and clean water filters. These are actually some of our boys from Naomi's village. Our kids get out and do outreach in the community themselves so that they can see that they are already agents of change. We also provide beds and mattresses so that there are safe sleeping arrangements. Often when teams come out, they are a part of projects like these. When our kids go on holidays from school, we provide these fortified one-meal packages, food packages, so that we can be sure the kids will not go hungry while they're away from school. We also are farming 6 acres at Cornerstone. So the farm, the produce there, the food, the vegetables and fruit not only provides food for our community families, but it also provides jobs. Many of our mothers of our kids work in the Cornerstone garden. That gives them safe, steady employment and a steady income. We also educate our community families on different farming techniques. We live in a semi-arid region, so learning different farming techniques is very helpful for them. This is an aquaponics farm that is on site at Cornerstone. It's pretty cool. For time's sake, I won't explain it. That's also an easy way of saying Bob will tell you more about it. But it is a really cool thing with fish and water, and it's all very self-contained. So we have this on site at Cornerstone, and our parents are learning how to do this as they come and volunteer and work there. We also provide microfinance loans to our families, our community families, most of them led by single mothers. This particular mother used her initial loan to set up a scrap metal recycling business. So she collects scrap metal and then she sells it. She has been so successful that she even had to hire an employee. So not only is she providing now for her family, she has created a job. It's really remarkable. Bob and I, have the rehearse part of this, but I just want to slow down and say, we truly have the joy of serving there on the front lines in Kenya. If you had backed this up to 2003 and you had told me this is what God had for my life, I would have run screaming. It has been a step-by-step journey, and there are still things that the Lord asks us to do that it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to say yes. But I can tell you, it hasn't been easy. Our kids now live in America, and we live over there. Those little kids, now they're grown. There are things that are hard about it, but we have seen God be God. There's a bench there at Naomi's village in the courtyard, and we call it our front row seat to watching God be God, to watching him do what only he can do. This is Kevin. Kevin was one of our first kids, and now he's in high school. He had no future. But God, he intervened. And it's our incredible joy to get to. We're not perfect. We're not any different than you. We're not some kind of. I had a friend who said, I know this has to be God, Julie, because I've known you for a long time. But for us to be able to do this work, it takes the help of thousands of people from all over the world. It really does. That's part of the reason we named it Naomi's Village. It takes a village, a global village, to raise these children and to raise them with the honor that they deserve because they're created in the image of God himself. We would love for you to come out and visit. We really would. Olivia is our director of volunteer services, and she has it all grooved out to bring teams out. You saw how little our kids were when they came out. We have kids come out all the time. I encourage you to come out as a family. I really do. Come out as a family and watch your kids. Watch the Lord work through your kids. I also want to invite you to sponsor a child. It really is our greatest need right now, is to sponsor a child. The pandemic, I mean, it's changed a lot of things, right? And I know that it's hit people in their pocketbook for sure. But it's been difficult for us because we haven't had as many teams. But we're still bringing in kids. Every year we bring in 50 new kids through the preschool, and the Lord hasn't told us to stop. So we won't stop until he says so, but we believe he'll keep providing. So I want to invite you to sponsor a child. I serve over in Kenya as the director of child sponsorship. There's another young lady, American young lady, who works with me out there. Her name is Allison, and we have 2 Kenyan staff who are on our sponsorship team. We work really hard to keep you connected with your child. We'll send pictures and emails and videos, and then it's up to you and your family to decide how involved you want to be with communicating with your child. It's a great opportunity and a wonderful gift that you could give to your children and that you could give to our children there as they grow up together and learn about one another together. We have different levels that we offer, and I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of it here. We can talk to you at the table about it, but really the dollar amounts that we offer are simply to fit everybody's budget. The child sponsorship dollars are what fund our operating budget. So everything it takes to run Leap Preschool, Naomi's Village Home, Cornerstone, and all the things that we do there. We hope that you'll become a part of our village that way. We hope that you'll stop by the table. We're really looking forward to getting to visit with each of you afterwards at the reception today. Yeah. Did you want to say anything else?
Yeah, thank you, Julie. I'll just close by saying that tying back to where we started, that we were just living in suburban Dallas and had no plans to do this. This wasn't on our radar. And all that's happened, she mentioned that she would have run screaming, you know, if she'd known. That was 19 years ago, the first trip. And I guess it's been 21 since the first time I went on a mission trip. And I think if you know sometimes what God has really planned for you that far in advance, if you know all that he has planned, it would be too much. But if you just say yes to what he's calling you to do at the time, then he prepares you and he equips you and you take that step, and then you're right here and he allows you to experience the fruit of that. And by the way, the suffering too that it took to get there, and the joy it is to be his child in that new location. And then he says, come a little further, do this. And pretty soon you find yourself far from where you started and less afraid and stronger. James 1 says, count it all joy, my brothers and sisters, when you encounter trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And perseverance must finish its work so that your faith may be mature and complete, lacking nothing. And so what happens is you develop perseverance. And then over time, your faith becomes mature and complete, lacking nothing. And I can honestly say, although my faith is not mature and complete, fully, lacking nothing, and I don't know that it will be on this side of glory, that it's far more so than it was. And it is definitely more persevering than it was before. Both of ours is. We slough off a lot of things we used to freak out about. And it's because of all those yeses and just believing that God is going to take us through the next trial and the next step. All of that you saw is not just because of our own obedience, but because of the obedience of hundreds, if not thousands, of other people. Some of them living in Kenya, some of them living in the States. It's been a work of God. Our encouragement to you is, if he's speaking to you today about something not necessarily related to this, if he's been speaking to you for the last few weeks, months, years even, and you've not said yes because you think it falls outside of a box that you've got, you know, maybe it's the American dream, all those things that are plans and structure, obey him. Just do it. Like the Nike thing says, just do it. Just do it and see what happens. Obey him. You don't have to know everything. Like Abraham, just go to a place I'll show you. That's pretty scary, right? Don't have to know it all. And see what happens. See if you don't find it way better. That's all I wanted to close by saying.